Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes hotter than hot tasty pancakes. I'm your host, Christian. Little change of scenery for our YouTube watchers, a little exclusive. You can subscribe to the audio feed via the podcast notes if you want to see the visuals. Did that make sense? That didn't quite make sense. You can see me if you subscribe on the YouTube channel if you're on the audio feed. If you're already on the YouTube channel, then you're just looking at me. I'm on vacation. This is Pop-O-Holics. I'm joined by my two favorite friends ever in the entire world.
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree. Christian, you're our favorite as well. I appreciate
He
that.
He is.
You're my favorite because I need you to carry this. Because I have a weird delay, which is messing with my mind, messing with my groove, because I got a little bit of a mobile setup. Because I'm on vacation. I'm out in St. Pete Beach, enjoying the sunny, beautiful coastline of Florida, the Gulf coastline.
And I have stolen your mobile mic, so I'll take a little bit of the blame today.
It's all good. Me and Chris have matching headphones.
Wasn't going to point that out, but sure.
They're
Shameless.
cool
We do
headphones.
indeed have matching
Shameless.
headphones. I'm not going to say the brand. Just figure it out.
They're good.
They are
good
great.
headphones.
I like them a lot.
So what are we talking about today? Well, this is a weekly upload. We have our regular... I'm going to turn off the monitoring because that just sounds terrible in my ears. This is our weekly upload, and we're going to be talking all things pop culture. Brian is going to bring us the Wacky News Corner. He's going to bring us the latest in news. We're going to talk about some upcoming releases. Then Brian has a couple things on his quick hits for what he's watched, but then we're going to be doing a full review, spoiler discussion on Everything Everywhere All at Once. So kind of a special quick hits.
We've all seen it.
We've all
finally
seen it. Brian had talked about it in like a month ago when it was in theaters or so. And we finally got a chance to catch it, and we want to talk about it because it's a very good film, and we want to gush all over it. So that's going to be in the second part of the show, and then we're going to do our community feedback. For podcast listeners and YouTube watchers, we also are covering all the Jurassic Park movies over on the podcast feed for Jurassic June. So check out Wednesday's episodes. We've covered every single Jurassic Park sequel, not the original. We have a commentary for that if you want to check that out. And this week we are talking Fallen Kingdom, revisiting that film. So it's been, I have more thoughts. I re-listened to World while I was editing it. Man, that film really hurt me. And I think there was some emotional stuff I had to work through. So that's if you want to hear Christian just pour his heart out on the end of cinema, you should catch it. The World. But
Jurassic World is the end of cinema.
But if you want some lighter takes, Fallen Kingdom, I think, is going to go over a little better. So that's coming up on the Wednesday episodes. But let's start the way we do on the show, which is with Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Start on wacky, start on wacky. Welcome back, everyone. So last week, we talked about a viral post from Todd Phillips that had announced that the second script, or the script for the sequel to 2019's Joker, had been written and had the tentative title Joker Folie à Deux. Joaquin Phoenix is...
What does Google call it, Brian?
I'm not... I can't.
Folie à Deux. Folie à Deux.
Can't get them all right, Google. At this point, Joaquin Phoenix was in a photo reading this script, has not officially confirmed that he's going to be in this movie, but they are deep in talks, and presumably that's going to be locked in soon. It's now been announced that Lady Gaga is also in talks to star in this movie. It's a little unclear how people are speculating, how they are in the articles about this, because Harley Quinn is being thrown around a lot, but it seems to be more them assuming than getting something from the sources that they're getting information from here. So Lady Gaga could be in this movie, is in talks to be in this movie. Speculation is saying that Harley Quinn could be the role. Obviously, this is different than Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn in the DC universe proper. And it's unclear if other characters from the canon are going to be brought in here. Another kind of shoe that dropped is that this movie is going to be a musical. So Todd Phillips was a producer on A Star Is Born, the Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga project. So this actually kind of makes a lot of sense coming off of that.
And I believe Bradley Cooper was a producer on Joker as well. So they've been like trading producer roles.
Yeah. So I said last week, I am ready to eat my words here. I talked about this movie not needing a sequel. I still think that's true. But the fact that they seem to be going in a totally different stylistic direction maybe gives me a little bit of hope that he's just using Joker, as he did with the first one, doing this Martin Scorsese homage to a large degree, maybe going into a different set of genres and playing around there with these characters. How do you guys feel about this? Are you more or less interested based on Lady Gaga being added as well as this being a musical?
I'm not crazy. That shit don't faze me. I'll never leave the clown.
That was excellent, firstly.
God, I can only imagine how long you've been holding on to that.
Since I heard the news.
I only saw that movie for the first time this week, but within the last week and a half, A Star Is Born. So I'm super primed for this news as well, because that
movie's way better than you expect it to be. It's a good movie.
It really is.
Yeah, solid.
And the music is amazing as well.
Absolutely.
Until it's supposed to be bad. But that's a different thing. Yeah. Chris, how are you feeling about this?
You know, like you, Brian, last week I said that I don't believe Joker was a film that was deserving of a sequel necessarily needed one. And when the news broke that the sequel was possibly going to be a musical, my initial reaction was what a weird choice that is. It's a complete 180 from, seemingly it could be a complete 180 from the tone of the first one. However, after ruminating on it for a week,
you realize that's zigging when you're supposed to.
It could be really cool because the entire film doesn't necessarily have to be a musical, and they can use the musical elements as a means of conveying Joker. And if Lady Gaga is indeed playing Harley Quinn, they could use it to convey their psychosis, only when they start to delve into their delusions and kind of give in to their insanity do things start to become musical. Kind of there was an episode of Scrubs back in the day where a patient suffered some head trauma and everyone in the hospital sang. They only saw everybody as singing whenever they spoke. So I think there are a lot of interesting things that they can do with a musical element for this film, and I don't necessarily think that saying, hey, the sequel's going to be a musical automatically equates to what a lot of people might assume when they think musicals, which is Disney, I don't necessarily think that automatically means it's going to be lighthearted. They could do some very dark things with musical elements. If you look at this wasn't a musical portion of the movie, but in The Suicide Squad, in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, there's a great sequence in which Harley is breaking out of this prison area, and there are flowers and rainbows, and it's just her psychosis being visualized in a way where how she's seeing her reality. And I just think it could be cool if Todd Phillips decides to go in this direction. So initially I was I don't know, but over the week I've really come around to this possibly being a really cool movie. Christian, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm down for full musical. I like your aspect, but I'd like to think I'm Lieutenant Gordon. I'm not affording my car payment. And it being real silly. But I think this is definitely the direction I want this to go in, as this being off of the DCU. They can really have the luxury of doing a lot of weird stuff, and they've got a lot of talent. You get Lady Gaga, you can hold a musical down about Joker, do it. I think that's super cool. I think
teenage Bruce Wayne can have a song about being sad that his parents are dead.
My parents are dead because I was scared of what I saw.
There it is, a preview.
Yeah,
Phillips, we are available.
Yeah, I'm available to compose your entire musical. I think I got some good idea. some good ideas. Not good idea. I have more than one good idea.
A singular idea. I have one idea to contribute.
I'm afraid of bats. That I am. But everybody's going to be bad like Dick Van Dyke English. I'm afraid of bits, I am.
It doesn't even take place in like London or anything.
This is how every little orphan kid sounds in Gotham City.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Make it like a Dickensian-esque musical. I'm all about it.
It'll just be Alfred's bit. It's not going to be everyone.
Right.
He's going to go full.
I have nothing more to say than this is cool. So I'm for it. This is really like uplifting news, that I appreciate. And it makes me more excited for the film.
For sure. So that is Lady Gaga, who's in talks to co-star in Joker, the Joker sequel, which apparently is going to be a musical by all accounts at this point. The next piece of news, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but apparently Jerry Seinfeld has a old bit about Pop-Tarts. And in the age of dredging up IP from the past to create content, here's Jerry Seinfeld making
Brian.
Unfrosted the Pop-Tart story.
As we know, as we've seen in the past, comedy bits and stand-up routines make excellent premises for full-length feature films.
Yeah, generally like a 5-minute thing stretched out over
2 hours.
An hour 45.
Make it 2 hours.
Always great. But so I will say there's a great cast here. We have Melissa McCarthy, Jim Gaffigan, Amy Schumer, Hugh Grant, and James Marsden all headlining this thing. And I guess the plot is based on a tale of ambition, betrayal, sugar, and menacing milkmen, which actually does lay out, I guess, a semi-historical version of the cereal rivals Kellogg's and Post as Pop-Tarts were being developed, a story that I know very little about, but presumably there is something to dive into there that his original bit was based off of. I think this is only going to be Seinfeld's second time directing after the B movie, which he did, which actually I never saw, and I heard very mixed things about. I guess, did you guys grow up eating Pop-Tarts? Was this a staple of the diet?
Did I grow up eating Pop-Tarts?
What's your history with Pop-Tarts? Are we going down this rabbit hole?
As an adult.
We have a nostalgic connection.
Christian and I are shouting over each other.
No, Pop-Tarts are terrible. They're fucking terrible food. I mean, I
didn't
had them
ask
as a
about the
kid.
quality. I asked about
they're the one thing that I ate as a kid that I was like, these are delicious, and I ate as an adult and like, I ate this shit. This shit tastes like plastic.
Does this qualify as food?
Yeah, this can't be part of the food pyramid. No, I think so the B. God, do you want me to answer the lead-in question about what do Pop-Tarts mean to me? They mean nothing. It's a breakfast brand, fucking sugary bullshit thing that
all right, so the history is not drawing you in.
What about the
Seinfeld?
So the B movie, I think, is grossly underrated, and it's become a meme. Like there's that famous YouTube video of every time they say B, it speeds
doubles
up
the pace. Yeah,
and it's kind of a ridiculous thing that exists. There's a lot of talent that went in the movie, and I haven't seen it in a decade, but I remember when I watched it, I went, that's like a fine like kids movie, Shrek-esque. Definitely not as culturally maybe more culturally relevant because of the memification of it all.
A bee falling in love with a woman.
But I think
it's comfortable slandering Shrek all the time. I just
hey now, you're an all-star. I think the B movies gets a lot of bullcrap because of the memification of it. So I like the B movie. It sounds like they're actually trying to tell a story that's more than the bit. Maybe the bit's a good clickbaity like headline to get producers to give them money to make it a more expensive movie, is my guess. So it sounds more interesting once you look into it than just based off a Pop-Tart bit, because I don't think that can support a movie. Chris.
I'm very interested in seeing this. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton about the founding of McDonald's. I think movies like this are really interesting. It really depends on what the tone of this film is going to be. Most of the cast is comprised of comedians. And on top of the people that you already mentioned, Brian, we also have Jack McBrayer, Tom Lennon, Adrian Martinez, Bobby Moynihan, Max Greenfield, Christian Slater, and Sarah Cooper. Like this is an all-star. it's a stacked cast, as we put it.
I can read the stars behind the B movie, and that wasn't
the B movie also has an insanely good cast behind it. But I'm
if this is
interested to see this movie.
I don't know if they said in the article.
I can't imagine that this would be an animated film.
No. I did some research. Hold on, let me check. Yeah, it's stop motion, and all the characters are made out of broken up, malleable Pop-Tarts.
It's a combination stop motion animatronic film.
Really cutting edge for the time.
Yeah. Jerry Seinfeld really wanted to experiment and get outside of his comfort zone when making this movie.
And the title of the movie, if I'm not mistaken, is called What's the Deal with Pop-Tarts, right?
That should have been the title of the movie.
May as well be.
But like I said, I enjoyed The Founder. I'm interested in stories like this. So based on the cast, based on the premise, hopefully it'll be good, and we'll be checking it out.
So that's Unfrosted, the Pop-Tart story, who has an all-star cast. It's being written and directed by Jerry Seinfeld. We'll see what comes of it. Recently, in the last month or so, Justin Lin stepped down just mere weeks into production of Fast 10, Fast X, and it turns out that now he is in talks to direct One Punch Man for Sony. So this is going to be a feature that is based on originally was a webcomic. One Punch Man started in 2009 about a character named Saitama. This was eventually adapted into an anime and a video game as well. I've seen one episode of the anime. I had a former roommate and good friend of mine was big into the show and watched the anime adaptation. Our main character has the power to defeat any foe with a single punch, but soon grows bored and seeks out a bigger challenge. So this is going to be written by Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinkner, who wrote Jumanji: The Next Level, as well as Venom. May or may not be a selling point, depending on your feelings on those movies. I actually think both those are pretty solid. And Ari Arad will be producing this film adaptation.
Chris is
which is definitely not a selling point for some members of our
very excited about that
Pop Squad. How do you guys feel about Justin Lin stepping down from Fast X and moving on to potentially direct One Punch Man?
Christian, do you wanna jump in here first, or do you want me to?
No, I can jump in first. Just get my thoughts out of the way. I've seen several episodes of One Punch Man. I have not seen the whole thing. It's a very interesting anime. Dropped off. Just it's one of those things. You just drop off. I didn't dislike it. I didn't absolutely love it, but it's a very interesting story. It's almost like an anime manga that's directly addressing the Superman problem, and it's kind of about the Superman problem, which I found very interesting. Justin Lin being the director means that it's at least going to be exciting to look at. The production side of things, the producers worry the hell out of me, but I think there's enough here that it's at least going to be very watchable and could be a very interesting commentary on all those things. So I'm relatively excited, and I'll stick here on the pod as someone who's a defender of Venom, and I think it should exist, Venom 1 and 2. I think it's fine. It's nothing groundbreaking, but, hopefully it's something that does rise above those two flicks, because they aren't the best, and there is a lot of good stuff to mine from it.
The Jumanji one...
Smash.
Was the first one, Brian? Or is that the sequel to the Legacy sequel, Jumanji film?
I think that's the sequel to
which killed,
the first one is Welcome to
which
the
I
Jungle.
didn't see.
Which was critically in audience well received, and they made a sequel of it. So
both of them were, yeah. So
I think there's enough here. There's some smoke, so I think there could be some fire about. So I'm giving this news story a thumbs. The Christian Katie, bing, boom, boom, bang, thumbs up.
We got the thumb.
That's it.
So
Chris,
I've seen the whole first season of One Punch Man, and I think it's an excellent piece of anime. It's satirical in the sense that it's trying to parody, the shonen genre, and like Christian said, it's kind of illustrating the Superman problem in that Saitama as a character has trained so hard that he can kill anybody, with One Punch. So he's just bored with being a superhero. And it's almost like a slice of life anime as well, which lends to kind of why the show is funny, right? And why it's kind of like a gag manga. We watched every single we watched many Fast and the Furious movies before F9 came out. Many of which Justin Lin directed. And while those movies are ludicrous and get progressively crazier as the franchise...
Are they ludicrous, Chris?
Oh, God, Brian. I didn't mean to do that. While they get progressively crazier, and Justin Lin is responsible for that craziness.
While they get progressively more Lil Bow Wow.
Yes. I think that the One Punch Man property is like a step above. Like, he's going to have to amp up the insanity to 11 if he wants to make this movie effectively.
Yeah, this is almost
really
something that needs
to the
like
zaniness of the premise.
Sorry to cut you off, Chris, but it's almost something that needs like a Snyder vision, because it is so big.
Snyder, or even like the Wachowski siblings.
Yeah, it's
like,
huge. It's
yes.
the types of things that happen in the show, in the anime, are like literally Earth-sized action events where people are getting punched out of the atmosphere, and you're getting a shot of the heavens and Earth. So it's such a big scope that it could either look so silly or be very, very, very visually interesting. So I agree with you, Chris.
I'm also wondering how they're going to condense everything into a 2-hour film. It could be original story as well. You know, who knows what they're going to end up doing with the narrative. But we've seen more failures when it comes to anime adaptations than we've seen successes. So, I mean, I don't have high hopes for this particular movie. I think some things, I know that, and you know, Christian has spoken to this many times. Animation can be a steep point of entry for some people. Some people just have a hard time accepting animation as like a valued medium, you know, and they view it as a children's medium. But there are some properties that are suited to be animated over being live action. Not everything that's animated needs a live action adaptation, because oftentimes a lot of the story elements just function better in that medium. So I push back a little bit that this even needs to exist, but I'm interested to see, because I honestly think the first season of One Punch Man, people have their problems with the second season. I personally haven't watched it, but I think the first season of One Punch Man is a really great piece of media. And I don't think it needs an adaptation. So we'll see how this turns out. Look at the most recent Cowboy Bebop adaptation on Netflix, canceled after the first season, even though that show tried to ride the line between anime sensibilities and live action. And here in the West, I just think it just doesn't work sometimes,
but
unfortunately.
I think the idea behind it, and just to wrap up this conversation, I think when we talk about all these conversions, it's about securing that audience that loves the property. So you've got a built-in, baked-in audience that's going to see it, that loves the property for what it is. And it's about extending it to audiences that just would not watch an anime. So there's an avenue there that is an important market. And if they can hit it well, I think we've seen that it can work and it can't. So I don't discredit it for trying. I think it's worked less than it has, so it's definitely more tricky.
It's such a hard line to ride, because the sensibilities of anime fans, they are way more tolerant of way more zany things than your general audience.
But they're not. So, I mean, they're not when it comes to the properties that they love. You know what I mean? When it comes to like original live action films. No, they are. I think that I think anime fans put up with a lot of stuff that you just can't get away with in live action, but they're still brutal to live action if it's not what what the things they enjoy about anime, be it the framing or the exact representation of the character, the same thing that affects every fan base. So I think live action does have to be a cut above, even for fans. I mean, look at Dragon Ball Evolution. It's like...
I'll give you an example with One Punch Man. And that is one of the reoccurring gags of One Punch Man. that can only be accomplished in either manga or animation is, for most of the show, Saitama has a really derpy face. And then when he gets serious, occasionally, when he finally finds an adversary that he deems to be worthy of attempting to fight, the animation style of how his face is drawn becomes more angular, more superhero-esque, like more of a traditional comic book style than his derpy, like oval-shaped eyes and silly little tiny smile. For those that have seen One Punch Man, they know what I'm talking about. I feel like that's an important part of the One Punch Man comedy. You know, it's not necessarily important for the storyline, but it's an important aspect that makes One Punch Man funny, and that's what it is. It's a gag manga.
You think it's impossible to pull off? I mean, essentially the element is he doesn't look serious, then he looks serious, and I think you can accomplish that in many different ways. You know, but you're saying is true, which is if they don't pay attention to that detail, something could be lost with that character. So that's an important thing to remember. But it doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility that a character looks derpy and then looks cool is essentially all that it boils down to.
We're about to talk about...
I've seen The Princess Bride. So, The Princess Diaries? Sorry, Princess Diaries.
Princess Diaries.
No, it's 10 Things I Hate About You. She took off the glasses.
Mm-hmm. That's all it takes sometimes.
Now she's
we're about to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once and quick hits. And, you know, we have a character or an actor in that movie, Ki Hu Kwan, who is capable of switching between goofy and serious within an instant. So, like, maybe if you find someone who can do that, maybe they can pull it off. But a part of the bit is also the visual aspect of it.
Right. And I think the bigger issue is that these details that are important to the story are lost sometimes in translation. And, I think that will definitely determine how successful this is.
So yeah, that's Justin Lin, who's in talks to direct an adaptation of One Punch Man for Sony. Moving into the last piece of news proper, just today, as of recording, we had the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary celebration that happened. And we have a few highlights that we're going to go through from this. So something that we've talked about a good deal on the podcast, you guys played it and covered Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was just part one of apparently what's going to be a trilogy. Mm-hmm. The second one has been announced with a trailer and is going to be called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I got to say, this trailer gives very little away in terms of story or even visuals. We just get a couple characters walking for the most part. It does look beautiful. The animation looks great. Although all three of the things we're talking about had little disclaimers about this isn't the final animation. So it seemed like they were trying to qualify it a little bit. I know you guys both played through the remake. What do you guys think about this new one, the new trailer that's coming out, and the name Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
Well, just really quickly before I hand it off to Chris, because he probably watched all this stuff. I was a little busy before we recorded when this news dropped. What I can say really quickly about the disclaimers, there's just been a lot of litigation that's happened based on trailers and people buying games and being able to go to court and say, this is what you sold me and I didn't get it. So there's a lot more of that happens with game trailers and early game demos, just because the amount of litigiousness that happens around pre-release stuff. They have to disclaim this isn't the game that you're going to buy. So right. A lot of that stuff is, potentially it's not, potentially it is what it looks like. They just do not want to be sued because it's happened quite a bit.
Of course.
So that's where you get a lot of that. I'm excited it's coming eventually. Did they announce a release date at all for Rebirth?
Next year, I believe.
Which is, dude, if it comes out next year, it'll be ahead of schedule in my head for how fast they were going to come out with these different parts of the 7 remake, which is very exciting. If they can hit that deadline, that's very impressive for all the work that's going into it. I like the title. It really fits with how they've handled the remake thus far, and so I'm excited for more Final Fantasy. I do, if it's, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of meat on this bone when it comes to the trailer, but if it's more of what they were doing in remake, but upgraded for next gen, that's very exciting stuff. Chris.
Our listeners will know, if they've listened to our review of Final Fantasy VII Remake, that Christian was much hotter on Remake than I was. And I will say that I still feel the same way. This isn't an instant buy for me, despite being a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. Nomura being the project leader on this game. And for those that are unaware, he also made Kingdom Hearts, which is notoriously convoluted. I am a fan of Kingdom Hearts as well, but I want my convoluted storytelling to stay in something that he originally created. Keep it in Kingdom Hearts. Final Fantasy VII Remake just wasn't the game that I wanted it to be. And the fact that each of these discs cost $60, I don't know if that's a $60 that I want to spend for something that I'm going to bitch about after spending 40 hours playing it.
Remake, as far as value proposition, as for a game, regardless of its remake characteristics, I think we could both agree that Final Fantasy VII Remake as itself was as full of a game as you'd expect.
Agreed.
That. Yeah.
100%. For those that are enjoying the content, it's a great Final Fantasy game. But
it's just not my Final Fantasy.
It just wasn't what I wanted out of something that I've waited over a decade to play.
And it was more than I expected because it actually did something with the idea of a remake. So that's where we differ. If you want to hear us dive deeper into our thoughts on the 7 Remake, we do have a whole episode that covers it.
For those that enjoyed Remake, this is very exciting news. I'm going to say that. What I'll say here is that it's not going to be like a day one buy for me. I want to see more about the game. I do like the idea that they're splitting it up into a trilogy. I'm happy that it's not going to be longer than a trilogy, because what that means is each of these games kind of represents one disc of the original PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII. I can't guarantee, but I can speculate that Rebirth is probably going to be most of the story content from that second disc, stretched with all the new Nomura-isms that are being placed into the game.
Stretched just like a Pop-Tart.
Just like a Pop-Tart, Brian. So yeah, game looks gorgeous. I love the characters. I'll always love the characters for Final Fantasy VII, but I'm not in love with the storytelling. So yeah, I'm not super excited about this.
So we had a couple of other trailers that we'll quickly talk about. There is a remaster of a former PSP game called Crisis Core that put a trailer out. And there's also a game called Ever Crisis. I think these are both RPGs of sorts. It was unclear how some of the games.
One's a mobile game, one's for consoles.
Okay.
Yeah, one was originally for the PSP, which is exciting if they get a console release, because I never got a chance. There's not very many people that had a PSP.
And it looked like
I did, and I played this game.
Can I borrow it? Your PSP?
That doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
Which is why, getting into this news, I was very excited to hear that Crisis Core was getting, and let's be clear, a remake and not a remaster. To my chagrin, during this presentation today, we found out...
Are you sure about this? In the article I'm looking at, they say remaster twice.
I don't know if that is... I don't believe that's correct. Because everything I've seen from the footage, all the articles that I've read, we've had this debate ever since Remake came out, which is way simpler than everyone always makes it out to be. I think it's a very clear line between remake and remaster. A remaster is an up-resing of an original game, and a remake is an overhaul where they make it from the ground up. Crisis Core is a remake because they're not porting the original PSP Crisis Core. It's new visuals. The fighting mechanics are going to be similar, but it's a whole new voice cast. They're not bringing the original voice cast back. So this really is a new game. It's called Crisis Core Reunion.
I don't know. It's pretty remastery to me. If the combat is pretty identical, they just redo the voices and
all the visuals. Well, visuals from the ground up.
I mean, as far as like re-rendering, but as long as like
it's not a re-render. It is I promise you.
Okay.
It is a remake.
Okay.
They've redone everything. Like all the footage that they showed during the presentation was not from the original Crisis Core.
Okay.
It was similar scenes, but they reanimated them with completely new graphics.
And just to be clear for the listeners who aren't familiar with this stuff, these are both a part of basically Final Fantasy VII Extended Universe. They call it compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which is a variety of media forms that extend the universe and follow different characters and parts of that.
Crisis Core is essentially a prequel to the original Final Fantasy VII game. So when rumors started going around that Crisis Core was getting, initially it was a remaster with the rumors, I was like, I'm so excited. My PSP is broken. This is one of my favorite PSP games. Like, I cannot wait to play this again. And then the presentation arrived today, and we found out that Nomura actually has his fingers in all 4 of these pies. And this Crisis Core is probably going to be a prequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake.
So if you will consider a remaster, like, I understand redoing the animations, but if it's like framed the same way, it just has a different engine that it's running essentially with different graphics, you'd consider it a remaster still, right? If it's the same story, like they don't change it or add any remaking things.
So it would technically still be a remake, but I would be really happy if they didn't mess with the original plot of Crisis Core when making this game. I don't think that's going to be the case. Mm-hmm. For instance, and we had this conversation when we had our Final Fantasy VII Remake episode, Ocarina of Time 3DS and Majora's Mask 3DFs are remakes. They're not remasters because they're complete overhauls of those original N64 games for the 3DS system. So, and they have different mechanics in places.
If they have different,
and they have different mechanics.
Games are weird because you have, the remaster.
Brian's like, I don't know.
Just really briefly, the remaster terminology when it comes to like audio, because mastering audio is a thing, and video, if you remaster video. Masters are the finishing touches, the je ne sais quoi, the ending flourishes. They can be coloring when it comes to video and music. They can be recompressing, even remixing, but it's the same assets. So video games are weird because they have so many different types of assets that there can be different levels of what constitutes that, which makes it a more difficult conversation, I think. But I think with video games, we can pretty firmly say, like, if you change the story, if mechanics are different, that points strongly towards remake territory, for sure.
If it's been made from the ground up.
But if it's made from the ground up, in it, because you have to do that with a new engine. You can't port, Unreal Engine, the original, to, like, Unreal Engine 5. You just can't port it. You would have to rebuild things. But if you rebuild it in the spirit and the story and the framing and, the beats are the same, I think that is a remastering of sorts. It's just game engines are very different than audio files or audio tapes or original film stock. So I do think it's harder to talk about with video games because you do.
And Christian and I have had this conversation many times.
Yeah.
And they've all been long-winded.
Yeah.
So,
but I do think it's not a clear A to B because you can't take the shit that ran the original Final Fantasy VII. They just don't use it. I don't even know what fucking engine they use. They probably used some.
I don't know either.
Japanese Squaresoft, as it was called back in the day, engine for it, because they used that same engine for. I know that engine was used from 7 to 9, right? But I don't know if they can actually build anything new or up-res. That there's limitations to those engines for modern platforms. Anyway, yeah, we've talked about it.
To wrap up the conversation about Crisis Core Reunion, I want to see more about this game, especially considering Nomura's involved. But I am more likely to buy this than I am Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
You'll buy it.
Quick thoughts. The game I'm most excited about is actually Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Because what this is they have... It's an entirely new mobile game, but they've taken kind of like the aesthetics and made them from Final Fantasy VII for PlayStation 1 and made them better and incorporated all the elements of the Final Fantasy VII timeline into this one mobile game. So getting to play through the Crisis Core storyline, the Final Fantasy VII storyline, the Advent Children storyline. I'm very excited to do all of that in a game that has very similar mechanics to the original PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII game.
It's like Budokai. It's like Dragon Ball Z Budokai, but Budokai for Final Fantasy VII lore.
So that's the game that I'm most excited about, and I can't believe that I'm, out of all these things, most excited about a mobile game that they're releasing.
And you're most excited for something that's to rehash the same thing you've already experienced. Anyway.
But better models, better backgrounds. This is what I wanted for the Final Fantasy VII game.
With the same thing, but prettier.
I just wanted a way to play it on modern consoles, and some gamers want that.
But you can. I mean, there's like 100 there's 100 remasters for Final Fantasy VII. They are using the original assets, so they still are polygonal, blocky.
That's
things.
a whole, bro. That is a whole other hour-long conversation about how those games have been remastered, and we just don't have time for that.
Yeah,
So-
you'd have to rebuild the engine.
which is what they're doing with Ever Crisis.
Okay.
And notice how at the beginning, well, I don't know if you watched the trailer, but at the beginning of the Ever Crisis trailer, the words that scan along the screen say,
Just how you remember it.
another type of remake. And what this is a type of remake that's closer to what the spirit of the original Final Fantasy VII was. Old man gamer rant over. I'm stepping off of my soapbox.
Just to,
Brian, continue.
I promise you I'm going to end it with this statement. I do not think that it is financially viable to redo the assets for an old game completely. Like it does not. Listen, art and commerce, whole conversation we're going to have, maybe with our everything all at once conversation. I don't think that any reality justifies doing that as much as you want it, but I hear you, Chris.
So that's some of the highlights from Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary celebration.
Brian, what's your opinion?
I knew you guys were going to be able to talk on this. I don't have much experience with Final Fantasy VII in particular, but I will again point listeners back to our episode where you guys covered that, and I believe was it Marcus that was on that
Marcus
as well?
Griggs was also
Good friend.
And
of
there are
the pod.
actually some hilarious revelations in the middle of that episode in regards to how Marcus ended up playing the game that completely astonished Christian and I.
There is,
And I'm going to
great
leave it at
stuff.
that. Go listen to the episode.
So that's it for the news proper. Let's move into some stuff that is coming out this week.
Rapid fire.
Very quickly, yes. Coming to TV this week on Thursday, we have The Bear coming to Hulu. This is an FX show that follows Carmi Berzatto, played by Jeremy Allen White, a young chef from the fine dining world who comes home to Chicago to run his family sandwich shop after a heartbreaking death in his family. This looks like very kind of slice of life style of show, a bunch of good characters, seeing this guy come back to a place that we don't know how long he's been gone for or his feelings about why he left, but it's definitely coming back to the hometown, trying to maybe shift things up in a way that the people who are running this previously or who are working there maybe push back against. Looks like it could be a nice little drama on Hulu. This is The Bear. That'll be out this Thursday. We also have Chloe coming to Prime Video this Friday. This was originally a BBC One show that aired there in February and is premiering on Prime Video this week. It's directed by Alice Seabright and Amanda Boyle and stars Aaron Doherty, Billy Howell, and many more. This follows Becky, who compares herself to the picture-perfect lives on Instagram, compulsively returning to one account, Chloe's. However, when Chloe dies suddenly, Becky's need to find out how and why leads her to assume a new identity. So the trailer for this, I'm kind of intrigued by this one. It looks like it could be really good, and it feels a bit like Blue Velvet Twin Peaks kind of thing, but in a modern era where someone who may or may not know some things about this character who disappears starts to maybe get in over her head trying to figure out what has happened. And it's playing with all these ideas of identity in a social media time and using that as a psychological thriller background. Looks like it could be some really good stuff. So that'll be on Prime Video this Friday. That's Chloe. We also have coming out to Paramount Plus, we have Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. This is the latest from writer-director Mike Judge. This also stars Mike Judge, obviously. It's the second film adaptation of his show from the 90s. and the sequel to Beavis and Butthead Do America from 1996. The plot of this: blasting off on a NASA space mission in 1998, mischievous best pals Beavis and Butthead time travel to the year 2022. As the NSA and U.S. government try to track them down, the clueless teens do their best to adjust to modern life. This movie, you know what you're getting with Beavis and Butthead. I never really watched this show. It was a little bit before my time. I saw clips of it later on after it was airing. I did see the movie and enjoyed that. I think I've only seen it one time and haven't come back to it. But maybe my closest experience with Beavis and Butthead is when Mike Judge returned to voice them for the first time in many years on Kid Cudi's album, Speeding Bullet to Heaven. So they play a consistent they're in the skits basically of that project, which don't have to get into it here. It's not top to bottom masterpiece from Cudi, but a bold take where he's playing all the instruments and has some genuinely good stuff on there, I think, as well as Beavis and Butthead return.
Brian said Kid Cudi playing instruments.
Well, it was it's a guitar driven album, and we'll talk about it at some point, but that's Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. That's coming to Paramount Plus this Friday. We also have coming to theaters, The Black Phone. This is something that I have seen too many trailers for at this point, and it looks great. Directed by Scott Derrickson and produced by Jason Blum, written by Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill. It's an adaptation of a short story of the same name by Joe Hill, writer in his own right, but the son of Stephen King as well. Stars Ethan Hawke as a serial killer who kidnaps a young boy played by Mason Thames. And that's all I'm going to say about this story. I would say if you're into horror movies, this sort of movie sounds interesting. This looks worthwhile. The buzz is great for it. I think the trailer may give away second act or third act stuff, which always frustrates me watching these trailers.
Really great imagery. I've seen it on social media. They've been posting it for like a year.
Yeah.
It's just a picture of him in that mask, and they're just
great.
This is the craziest horror movie ever. When's it out? I don't know, next year. I'm like, what kind of marketing
when
is
people go back
marketing
to theaters, whenever that is.
Yeah. I think they've had this film shot for 3 years.
It's definitely possible. Yeah, definitely possible. So that's The Black Phone. That'll be in theaters this Friday. We also have Elvis coming to theaters this Friday. This is director Baz Luhrmann's latest.
Hold on, baby. Hold on, baby.
Back from the grave.
Stroke Elvis.
Doing a
You are going to be my best investment. You are going to be my best investment.
Tom Hanks impression from the film.
This movie obviously follows Elvis Presley and his rise to fame in the 1950s while maintaining a complex relationship with his manager, impersonated by Christian just now, Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks. We have Austin Butler playing Elvis himself. Honestly, I think the trailers have been largely pretty good for this movie, and I conceptually like what they're doing. Tom Hanks, it's hard not to get completely ripped out of the movie when you see all the prosthetics work. I'm hoping it looks better and the accent is a little more
You're
toned
going
down.
to be the king of rock and roll.
Now you're just doing like Polka King, like Jack Black as the Polka King.
I'm sorry. I've seen
Great movie.
I've seen Walk Hard. There's no way this movie works. You can't watch Walk Hard and watch any of this shit. It's gonna be just
Elvis thinks about his whole life before he walks out on stage.
Hey. I'm gonna be a rock star. Who gives a shit about Elvis right now? This movie's gonna bomb. I don't know. It's gonna be so bad.
Wow.
All right. So first of all, a lot of people give a shit about Elvis. He's kind of a cultural icon.
He's a very talented individual. He stole everything from black people. I just don't think that. My brother
This movie seems to be at least partially addressing that and maybe shedding some light on things happening here. But yes, of course.
I like a peanut butter sandwich. Anyway, sorry, I'm coming off. I have a lot of love
Everything
for Elvis
that I've
Presley.
heard about the film, or at least in regards to Austin Butler, he's phenomenal in the movie, from what I've heard. So
Okay.
And Baz Luhrmann, I mean, it's definitely a particular style, but the movie is going to be visually interesting.
Sure,
you know
of course.
that with this guy behind the camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a lot of baggage that goes along with Elvis and his popularity. That
And a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. Hey.
Christian knows a lot about Elvis.
Come on now.
As showing right now.
So
He didn't write any of his music. That's probably where I get most mad. I'm like, dude, just he knew how to shake his hips like more talented people than him. Anyway, I've got my thoughts on Elvis Presley.
This is just, you know,
shitting on Elvis.
most singers probably don't write their own music. But anyway,
It's not wrong, 100%. Yeah.
so that's Elvis. That's coming out this Friday. I'm hopeful that Christian's going to see this movie and do the classic conkling 180.
Do the good old conkling 180.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for this, but that's Elvis. That'll be out in theaters this Friday.
It was real good. I liked it.
Oh,
There's just no way anyone talk. So my biggest problem is with all the things I've said. It's with no one can talk like Elvis and it be like a drama. You know, no one can impersonate Elvis and it be like a compelling drama. Because the man.
Have you seen the trailer?
Yeah, it's a good trailer. No, it's a good trailer.
I think he does. The voice sounds pretty good, and his voice. I mean,
No,
it's
he
hard when Tom
sounds
Hanks
like-
is doing such a thing.
Yeah. But I think that's bad.
Scene stealer, Tom Hanks.
I think that's
In a bad
bad.
way.
But I also think that like if you had to do like A Few Good Men, like the scene from A Few Good Men, right? Which is it literally won I believe won Tom Cruise an Academy Award nomination. And what's his face? Jack Nicholson. It's great. If someone had to sound like Elvis during that scene, it would have ruined the scene because he sounds.
but
Because he sounds ridiculous.
it's also not about Elvis.
That is a very good point. That is a very good point. What I'm saying is, if anybody was trying to make a compelling, dramatic monologue or story,
Elvis ordered the code red.
if they had to sound like Elvis, it would be the feat of a lifetime. Where it's like if Austin Butler comes off not super ridiculous but just kind of silly, it's a monumental win because it's just hard to be like, oh, I didn't know what I was gonna do. Come on, I'm doing it right now. That's it. That's what it is. If I did that 20% better, it would sound worse. I don't know how I'm gonna do the show tonight.
Almost made it through what's coming out this week without a digression.
I don't.
Christian specifically stated.
I'm so sorry,
fire.
Chris. I didn't know what. I just want to rock and roll, Chris. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry, Chris. I'm gonna pass out. I'm gonna take a nap.
Take a breath.
Oh, the king's gotta go down.
That is the news this week, and we've lost Elvis.
King's going down.
The king is literally lightheaded right now. I just gotta know how to love. That's gonna be a line. I just gotta want to know how to do a love. It's gonna be some line that's like that. I guarantee everybody's gonna be talking about it.
Can't wait to hear about it.
Listen. I'm not a fully a prophet, but I know what Elvis Presley sounds like. Anyway, that's going to do it for the news. Thanks, Brian, for that. Let's go quickly into quick hits, which we're going to be talking mostly about everything, everywhere, all at once. But Brian's got a couple things. Let's start that right meow. Quick hits is that special part of the show where we talk about what we've been consuming in the world of pop culture. Brian, you got a couple things before we get into our everything, everywhere, all at once review. So I'm going to hand the floor back to you, bud.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I may have misunderstood the group chat today, so apologies.
It's cool.
I wasn't supposed to add anything here.
Make them super
I'll go
quick.
very quickly.
Super quick, super hit.
These will be super quick hits.
Make them super quick and super hit. All right. Oh, come on.
following
now.
us.
Oh, come on, Brian. Give it to us quick, Brian. Oh yeah. Oh.
You ain't nothing but a watcher.
Now you got it.
Excellent.
All right, never again. I saw Watcher. I talked about this a week or two ago on the week of the upload that this was coming out. This is from director Chloe Okuno. It stars Micah Monroe and Carl Glusman. This movie follows a couple who moves to a new country where the husband speaks the language and the wife doesn't. There is a serial killer who has just started doing killings, and our main character, played by Micah Monroe, starts to feel like she's being watched by someone. And because there's a serial killer around, the tension begins to rise. There's a language barrier happening. I think this movie is really solid. I don't think it's breaking any new ground necessarily in terms of this genre, but it does some good stuff with how society believes or doesn't believe women about certain things that they're going through, and just showing men for being kind of what they are. Definitely, I was thinking about the movie Alex Garland's Men recently, although they're very different movies in a lot of ways, kind of showing some similar themes about how men treat women, and has a fun third act that just kind of leaves you like, oh, okay, that's where we went. Very solid. If you're into horror movies, easy recommend. Definitely won't be disappointed with Watcher. That's in theaters now. I also was able to watch something that's on VOD. This is called Daschcam. So this comes from director Rob Savage, and it was written by him, Gemma Hurley, and Jed Shepard. This is the team behind the movie Host, that I believe I talked about on the podcast as well. Both of these very much pandemic films. They're both kind of like just over an hour length. So Host was a Zoom movie. Basically, the entire movie takes place on Zoom. This one, as the title suggests, is largely shot on an iPhone from a dash cam. The main character, who is played by Annie Hardy, is kind of a conservative live streamer who does improv songs based on things that the people who are commenting on her stream provide. So she's constantly just rapping / singing and coming up with things. She is a pretty just objectionable person. It's not very easy to like this character. She's kind of just a douchebag to everyone, kind of very happy about her opinions and ignorance and rubbing it in everyone's face. But because of that, it's ridiculously funny. And she's constantly just doing things that, obviously shows like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The humor comes from the fact that these people are so ridiculously just horrible. Awful. Yeah. So she's a very fun character to follow. The plot of the movie itself starts off in a fairly low-key way and just progresses into complete insanity by the end of this movie in really fun ways. It's I don't think it's a spoiler to say she raps the end credits of this movie, which is maybe the first time I've ever seen something like that, which is a lot of fun. Although she doesn't always say good things, or very rarely says good things about the people that she's rapping about. She's constantly filthy, and half of this movie, she's just screaming expletives that are ridiculously sexual as a fear mechanism. So it's definitely a very certain type of vibe, very low budget, but I had a lot of fun with Daschcam as well, and that is on VOD right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm the one who's probably TikToked the most out of all of us. And there are people that will do live streams where they're just rapping in the comment section. And I'm like, I could do this, but I think it would drive me insane. And I don't think that's what I want to be known for. So it is like a legit thing. And I've thought about, what's that person's life like? What happens when they're like, all right, bye, and then click the button?
They just continue on. And I think this actor,
as soon as they hang up, they're just like,
oh, you're gonna be okay. Gonna have a peanut butter sandwich. Oh, mama.
Brian, you were saying?
No, I think the actor who's playing the main character actually has a established like live stream like this. I think it's something that she'd done prior. So yeah, definitely bringing that into this narrative.
All right, so that's Daschcam, available on VOD, and Watcher, which is in theaters. Thank you, Brian. All right, that's going to take us into our review of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Mrs. Wang.
Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
I am paying attention.
Now, you may only see a pile of receipts, but I see a story. I can see where this story is going. It does not look good.
What's happening?
Evelyn, I'm not your husband. I'm another version of him from another universe. I'm here because we need your help.
Very busy today. No time to help you.
Across the multiverse, I've seen thousands of Evelyns. You can access all of their memories, their emotions, even their skills. There's a great evil spreading throughout the many verses.
That is from the trailer of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it is directed by the Daniels, which is Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. Thank you, Chris. And it stars Michelle Yeoh, Stephanie Sue, apologies for any mispronunciation, K.U. Kwan, James Hong, Jamie Lee Curtis, Telly Medell, Jenny Slate, and Harry Shum Jr., as well as many others. And this is kind of the indie success story of the year, a movie that came out and just by buzz and critical review somehow managed to actually gain success throughout its theatrical run and made more and more money every weekend just based on word of mouth, and was only really shut down because of Doctor Strange. And I was really bummed out I didn't get to see this in theaters, and still am even talking about it right now. But we're going to quickly talk about our non-spoiler thoughts and then go into a quick spoiler section. This will be kind of a mini review. So, Chris, you hadn't seen this movie before. What were your thoughts going into this movie, and did it live up to all that hype?
It certainly had a lot of hype built up to it prior to watching it. But this movie is magnificent. Despite its hard science fiction premise, Brian referred to this movie as life-affirming when he talked about it several months ago when it was in theaters, and I have to agree with that. It's a hard sci-fi premise with a lot of multiverse stuff taking place, but at its heart, and one of the things I love most about this movie is that it's seemingly about one thing, but I think audiences can take a multitude of themes away from this film, no pun intended, and I think that's why it's been so successful. The portions of this film are about being seen and accepting those around you and being kind, but it's also a story about immigrants to the United States and their relationships with their children. And there's so much you can pull away from this film, and it's so human. By the end of it, you just feel good. It makes you feel warm inside, and I'm just so incredibly happy for Michelle Yeoh, because this is a movie where she's finally gotten to shine more than she has in the past. She's a phenomenal action star, incredibly talented individual, and yet what she does with the character of Evelyn in this movie, she's just finally able to express her range as an actor, and I'm so happy that she got a project like this. Ki-Hu Kwan, we were talking a little bit before the recording about his performance in this film, also exceptional. The way he can shift between different characters on a dime. I can't believe that I've only seen him in Temple of Doom and The Goonies. It breaks my heart that he retired from acting in 2002, and we have 20 years of him just being rejected by Hollywood and the film industry, because he shows, like Michelle Yeoh, how incredibly talented of an actor he is in this film. Every performance in the movie is just phenomenal. And this is very likely going to be my favorite movie of 2022. So if you haven't, I know Chris and I are very late to the game. We caught it on VOD, and as he mentioned, the film has done exceptionally well in theaters. But if you're still like Chris and I and you've yet to see the movie, maybe for some reason you aren't going to theaters, like this is a must-watch for the year, I think. And I told Brian that this was a blind buy for me on VOD because I knew just from all the reviews and what he had said and just all the praise that it was getting that this film was going to be amazing. And it absolutely delivered on that. I'm happy to say.
Just on that point, there's a bundle right now available where you can get Swiss Army Man, which is the Daniel's first
and everything
film,
everywhere all at once
for $28. So I think that's
it's a great deal. That's a phenomenal deal.
I think it's a great double feature there.
I also, one last thing before I toss it to you. Sorry.
You're good.
It's I also feel a little bit bad for the Daniels because they started working on this multiverse movie in 2016 prior to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse coming out and kind of like the big multiversal boom that we have in media. And
I think it actually works to its advantage. I think
I think it's the best explanation and best version of the multiverse we've seen so far. But I am a little sad for them because this could have been an incredibly unique film about the multiverse, and yet it has been released in the midst of like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and all this Spider-Man. Hollywood is obsessed with multiverse right now.
Well, Marvel, but I actually think general audiences are now prepped to the idea, and this movie does enough unique things that really make it stand out, like you said. So I think it actually helps the maximalist film style of how things just happen. I think the fundamental general audience understanding of multiverse is based on the MCU is actually a boon to this film being more digestible because you
might be right.
So I actually think it works counter to what you're saying. If I were to guess, it's a total opinion.
I will say though that I think the explanation of the multiverse in this film is incredibly simple and very easy to understand.
For sure.
Like the way that they describe it, it's super easy to get.
I just want to say I'm so glad you enjoyed this, Chris, and that you're so hot on it. In terms of how well this movie is doing theatrically, it is now domestically and internationally the highest grossing A24 movie of all time.
So awesome.
That's ahead of Moonlight, Hereditary, Lady Bird, which were some of the previously top ones.
You just reminded me, and I'm so sorry. One last thing that I want to say. I'm very happy for the Russo brothers. Joe and Anthony Russo produced this film. And since Avengers Endgame, everything that they produced hasn't been the best. And oh my God, finally, they've produced a movie that's just absolutely out of this world.
Speaking of production, $25 million budget, and I can tell you,
oh my gosh,
it is one of the most incredible return on investment from an artistic standpoint that we've seen in Hollywood in a long time, as well as just economic. I mean, the film did what? Does anybody have these figures pulled up? I think it's a little hard for me. I want to say they pulled in at least $80-90 million, if not more.
$85.1 million at the box office.
Nailed it. So incredible, and the movie looks like a $90 million movie, which is awesome. Brian, before my opinions, I do want to revisit and see if you've seen it a couple more times, and if you have any additional thoughts to what you said originally on our quick hits about a month ago.
This is a movie that I've been meaning to rewatch, but I have not yet. But I've been constantly convincing other people in my life to watch it. So I'm putting the good word out there. And every time I talk about it, I just talked about it with a coworker today, and I just get chills coming back to it. Chris, you didn't mention, I'm not sure if this element worked as well for you, but it can't be understated how hilarious this movie is.
Oh yeah. And this movie is like every genre in one film.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes, exactly. And I think that really helps with the emotional range of this movie. You're laughing constantly, but then it really hits home for these emotional kind of small moments, considering how big the movie is in scope to some degree. But yeah, this is still definitely going to be top 3 for me this year, probably top number 1 at this point as well for me so far this year.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to beat on a visual and storytelling standpoint. So I actually had a pretty not ideal viewing. There was a crying baby in my theater, which was here.
Was it your baby?
It was my baby, and he was crying a lot, and I had to get up a lot. A lot of fits and starts with this watching, but I wanted to so badly see it, and it was available on VOD, so made the time to see it. So I can't wait to revisit it. So even with that, it really stuck out as essentially the way I describe this movie. It's like The Matrix and Scott Pilgrim meets a Family Guy gag. But the Family Guy gag has the emotional weight of an entire movie. And it consists of like maybe, 5 to 7 Family Guy gags that are complete emotional arcs. And it's what's really impressive about the entire film is that it works at all, because it seems like if you described it, or even if you read the script, I think you'd be like, there's too much happening. There really is just so much happening at once and so much to keep track of that it's a tribute to the generosity of the filmmakers and honestly the blood, sweat, and tears they went through to film some of these shots that you see happen, and why the visual effects work so hard is because it would have been very labor intensive to set up the way they did it, but it works so well, and how they're able to bring in all of these practical effects, do very, very smart decisions. We've been talking a lot about on the Jurassic June month about how you mix CGI and real stuff, and they do a really smart thing where most of their CGI is removal and most of their practical effects are what your eye is drawn to, while the CGI just works its magic. And the Daniels have a great interview on Culturally Relevant, which is David Chen's podcast, where they talk about some of this, where they're like, oh, we can do Kung Fu. We just got to put pads everywhere. And they're like, removing pads is super easy. And putting in XYZ, I won't spoil it, but XYZ elements is practically is also not super hard, and you can distract from the CGI of this. And I would be pressed to say, if you can detect any computer generated effects, right, it is mostly practical, where the CGI is just background removal stuff. So really smart use of that. And the fact that it's so ridiculous, there's so many ridiculous gags that just go and go. And Brian, you mentioned this, gags that are reached their final conclusion, emotionally too. Like, they're funny on the surface, and then they're emotionally paid off is so impressive and so absurd. And so the fact that the film works at all is pretty ludicrous. I can't imagine anybody that's not our age or younger gravitating towards it, because there is just so much, and there is a lot of like internal film humor, but it seems like it's connecting with audiences, and I'm curious to see what older people think. Not that that's the most important demographic, but because it is so much, I do wonder if it's not 4 quadrants of a great film, but it is certainly a film for me and for all of us here. And certainly it pays off in, I think, more ways than one, which lends itself to us as film critics being really excited about it, but also general audiences for how it just pays off everything it sets up. It really doesn't disappoint. It's overly generous with the way it makes it, and it constantly surprises you with new gags. So that's general thoughts. Any other general thoughts before we go into spoilers?
See this movie. Blind buy.
An easy blind buy, for sure. I do think it's, when we talked about the in the original Quick Hits, I was blown away with how much I think it is more like The Matrix than I thought it was going to be. But it's like The Matrix, but funny. Still the emotional core.
Fun.
Still the visual. Well, The Matrix is a lot of fun. I'm not gonna say that, but it's not as heavy philosophically. It's heavier emotionally. It's a more emotionally conscious Matrix in a lot of ways. All right, let's move on to spoilers for Everything Everywhere All at Once. All right, we're running a little long on the quick hits, so quickly let's just go through a couple of our favorite moments from this flick. Chris, let's start with you.
I honestly don't want to give too many spoilers away, because I think going in blind to this film is probably the best way to view it.
But we're in the spoilers. We told people.
But I will say, going into this movie, I did not expect one of the most emotionally moving scenes in the film to be between 2 inanimate objects. So,
yes.
And that's I'm phrasing it vaguely intentionally, but that was one of the first moments where I was just like, oh god, this movie has me. A hilarious,
and it's quiet. The scene is quiet. I think the air moving through and letting it, for a movie that's so full, and I didn't mention the soundtrack is like And let's give it up for Claire de Lune. Man, Claire de Lune last 5 years, really cinematically one of the most important pieces of music. It's a great piece of music, but man, it's had a resurgence, a 2-century resurgence here. Really plays a role in the whole soundtrack really holds together. And what's interesting about the scene you're pointing out is it's completely vapid of that during that scene. I think that's important, and it's really like a quiet. It works on so many levels. I'll just say.
Agreed. In terms of more ridiculous things in the film, the setup for Raccacoonie,
Oh my God.
of Evelyn just confusing the titles of Ratatouille as being Raccacoonie, and then one of the multiverses actually being Raccacoonie, had me dying.
Every time.
And it keeps going.
Oh, the whole time. It's one of the main multiverses that she taps into.
The tall hat reveal is just absolute masterclass stuff.
The film is so brilliant in how it like gradually reveals things to us from all these multiverses, because the first time we visit that chef multiverse, you really just think we're watching an Evelyn
she needs to just be good at slicing and dicing.
a professional chef, because it cuts to the chef using Raccacoonie behind her, and he's seemingly just a better teppanyaki chef. Like there's no supernatural or weird thing taking place.
When we saw that, when 100% of audiences saw that, they didn't go, I bet that Raccacoonie is underneath that hat.
Raccoon under his chef hat.
None of us thought that. And for like, we get cynical as film reviewers of like, oh, I saw this comment and I was like, the word, like, and there's no reality. There's no multiverse in which any of us predicted, oh, they're going to pay off the Raccacoonie bit with a raccoon under that hat.
I absolutely love that the universe in which Evelyn is a martial artist is essentially a take on Michelle Yeoh's existence.
Oh, there's a shot of her at the Crazy Rich Asians premiere.
Yeah,
That's I didn't catch my
multiple real. I believe that I'm pretty sure they use real footage from her over the years at various red carpet events.
Yeah.
It's great.
So this was the one that supposedly, when I heard people talking about it, was kind of the Wong Kar-wai inspired multiverse. So
especially towards the back half when they're in
Right.
the alley where, they're smoking cigarettes, and
leads to one of my favorite moments is when our husband, and what is it? Wayne?
I thought it was Raymond.
it's not Short Round. No, it is Wayman Wang.
Waymond. So yeah, when that version of Waymond is basically making the case for his style of quote unquote fighting, and there's a reveal in, I don't know if I want to say it. There's a bit in Adaptation that's very similar to this moment for me, and it works incredibly in both movies. But this was really, really powerful. Just him opening up to her that not only does the weight of the world weigh on him and he chooses to still be the way he is, but also that he would give anything just to spend a life that she seems to be taking for granted at this point with her. And that would mean
doing laundry and paying taxes.
Doing laundry and paying taxes.
It was with her, it'd be worth it.
I literally, my fiance looked down at her phone because she was actually trying to do some other stuff while we were watching this. This is really a Christian selfish watch for us while she was doing some other stuff. And I literally just I was like, this is what they just said. And she's like, really? And I had to bring her into the moment because I was like, it immediately clicked and I was like, that's a beautiful sentiment. That's Absolutely. The better version of I loved you in every multiverse, which is still a great line. A great line. Don't want to take anything away from that line from another movie that I won't mention. But it is the art house version of that.
When Brian saw those movies back to back, I was like, you can't compare these two films. Even having not seen Everything Everywhere All at Once yet, I was just like,
they're two
don't
different
do
movies,
that.
though. It's like a multiverse of, you talk about like a sci-fi concept. It's like comparing, Blade Runner to Terminator or something. They're very different movies. So
to get back to the scene that Brian was talking about, and so few movies do this, and socially kind people like Waymond are seemingly trod upon and looked down on as being weak. Don't underestimate kind people. Being kind is a choice. And I think that this movie executes that so well. It, especially in today's world, combating all the bullshit and choosing to be a nice person is incredibly difficult. So I just really absolutely love this scene as well, Brian.
Chris says,
because
as a kind
seemingly,
a genuinely, I will say, Chris is a genuinely kind person,
despite seeming so cynical and angry all the time.
No, you are.
I think our viewers see more of me as that.
No, you're definitely a kind soul. Yeah,
But,
no, it's a beautiful sequence.
it's a great
definitely
moment.
when that character starts to fully because we see, and I think for the better, we see Michelle Yeoh's character be very much like a very strong person, and her husband is kind of like a buffoon, and to really have that the emotional payoff of, oh no, in every situation, she realizes it through him talking to the tax lady, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, which, oh my God, it's another digression. Like Jamie Lee Curtis disappearing in her role. That revelation of like, what did he do? What did he do? Oh, he's just not like his kindness is his weapon. And he's able to.
What did my silly husband say to you? I think she says at the end of the movie, like.
Yeah, and just dude, so I'll point out, just go into some of my favorite moments real quick. I think the opening 20 minutes is incredible. Before we even get into any silly shit, just the family dynamics and going through the laundromat, it just shows you how confident the filmmakers are. And it's so, it's so set and setting and placing us in the stress of what these characters are going through, that when it's heightened by the sci-fi stuff, I think it just takes, it holds down the emotional core, even though it's so ridiculous that who are the most important characters in all of the universes? It's the people that own the laundromat. Which is, kind of the ridiculousness that you kind of detach from to like accept the movie. But because the emotional stakes are there, that's really the glue that holds it together. And I think that opening 20 minutes is absolutely pivotal to all that. Obviously, we can point out some of like the biggest like emotional standout points, which is the car moment that happens earlier and then is echoed later. Like I think that's like tail end crux of holding this movie together. But just the I think one of my favorite scenes is it's established that in order to connect with another multiverse version of yourself, to get their skills and whatnot, to get your I know Kung Fu moment from another moment,
jumping pad,
you have to do something silly. And there's I think one of the most inventive fight scenes is Michelle Yeoh and the two people are increasingly having to keep doing ridiculous stuff. And we also have the benefit of Waymond and her daughter Joy's character having to like understand what's happening, and so they're as an audience kind of it's a really smart way of doing exposition for like, if you didn't get it, we're gonna put two characters that are also trying to understand what's happening in case you didn't get it when they had some exposition about what it is, and the realization of like what they're doing silly and the recommendations there. Like
I love that.
So good.
During that sequence, they're like recommending silly things for her to do without even understanding like the why behind it.
Yeah.
So like so God knows what these jumping off points will lead her to.
Yeah, and the fact that it like culminates in the real tension of the scene happens with like they need to put something up their butt. Like it's so ridiculous, patently silly, and at one point someone's running around with a statue shoved up their ass. I don't know how the movie works. Like it sounds, if you had to describe this and you were like, I'm gonna make this movie, it's so ridiculous. But I think the Daniels have established themselves as, yeah, we're gonna make a movie about a guy carrying around a corpse as a best friend. We're gonna talk about multiverses where you have to do something silly and eat chapstick and shove something up your ass to like make a sci-fi magic thing happen. Like how you execute that, and then at the end you're like, I'm on the borderline of tears and I'm thinking about my entire life after seeing all this silly shit. Like it's I'm at a loss for words about how you pull that. Like it doesn't make sense that it works that well. Like we've always known Judd Apatow was like, oh, what a revelation. He makes dramas that are really funny. It's like, this is like...
Dramedies.
You made absolute... Thank you, Chris. You made an absolutely... You made, a Family Guy sketch emotionally heartbreaking and making me think about my life and my relationships. Like, what? I think that's the real magic trick of the whole film, is that even more than Swiss Army Man, it really taps into that.
Christian, to to get back to the butt plugs of it all. And I don't know what this says about me, but during that scene, that initial scene where we're first introduced to Jamie Lee Curtis's character, and she's talking about earning these awards, and she's so presents us. She presents us with the awards, and I, in that moment, was just laughing at the fact that this very uptight character has these awards that are shaped like butt plugs.
Which you immediately go, oh, the directors are smart because she's anally retentive. She's an IRS person. What a funny joke. End of joke.
Visual bit. End of joke.
End of joke.
And then we get to the other scene, and I'm like, oh, there's a greater payoff for this bit.
And that's the
Amazing.
core of this the set pieces of this movie.
It's the same. It's honestly the same way they construct a joke as the Rakakuni joke that we were just talking about. Like, each joke is expertly set up, and then you think the punchline is one thing, but there's actually a grander punchline to come.
And
I love it.
I just think it's like you had Conan O'Brien, and then you had Conan O'Brien 15 years ago, and you had Conan O'Brien 15 years from now, and they collaborated to write a series of bits. Like, it feels like intelligence from different like, I don't know how one person, and it's, there's some writers and two directors here, so obviously it's a collaborative effort, but what a success in collaboration, because not one person on this earth can be that intentional about the stuff they're doing. So it's just a masterclass in collaboration, because it's absolutely, no one could think of that, because it's just way too smart. Way too smart for one person. Brian,
you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just saying, even because there's obviously some of the incredible comedic gags that you guys are referencing, but I love too how something like the sausage fingers, the hot dog fingers universe, that's originally seeming to be just a gag, and then basically helps her understand her daughter, and
it's the honestly, it's the crux of that whole emotional twist
with her daughter, and it culminated with seeing her husband deal with her and her giving her some slack.
Can I tell you the best detail? The best detail in all of that is that in the hot dog fingers universe, they use their feet a lot, right? Which pays off.
They play piano with their feet, yeah.
And when Jamie Lee Curtis's character, the wrist brace on her foot, I was like, God. You're too nice. You're too nice, filmmakers. We didn't deserve you thinking about all of this much. And I almost cried at that moment from just like thoughtfulness of like, you really wanted to make a good movie. I knew you really
is
wanted
a great moment, though, because that's the moment that our Evelyn realizes that no matter what multiverse you're in, every multiverse has something positive to offer. And that ties into kind of what I was saying earlier about some of the themes that I pulled away from this movie of acceptance and kindness and just being seen, accepting people for who they are. And that kind of forms this catalyst where she's able to defeat people using not her method of fighting, but Wayman's method, which is just giving people what they want, acknowledging people for the people that they see themselves as on the inside. It's just so fucking beautiful in the most ridiculous, but it's presented in such a ridiculous way, but it's so genuinely human and wonderful. And I love it.
I think what connected with me most was the idea of like, personally, like dwelling on all the infinite things that could have been, right? And they frame it in the everything bagel, which is hilarious because my fiance loves everything bagel. So it's so funny, that whole idea behind, if you focus on everything, it'll only lead to you thinking that nothing matters, because what could have been is such an alluring, desperate black hole of where your potential lies, right? And I love that they framed it around the joke of Michelle Yeoh's character being like, you're perfect because you're so bad at everything. You're so empty to
infinite
be great.
Potential.
You have infinite potential. And I was like, that is such a fun way of looking at, like, if you're down on yourself.
Backhanded compliment of the best kind.
It's so good. So I think that's what emotionally
go up from here.
more than the as soon as you had the not accepting of the generation and gay character, I was like, I know where they're going with this. So that was, I knew where it was going. I'm glad they did it. I think it's meaningful. I think they do it really well. But it wasn't something that was like, oh, they really turned that around. I think how they did it was surprising, and the hot dog fingers universe and everything. So it definitely pays off in that way. But I think what more caught me off guard was that this movie was a lot about, getting too hyped up on what it could be. And the generational differences between Michelle Yeoh's character being obviously thinking about everything her life could have been, and her daughter Joy thinking about everything it can be as she's facing adolescence and going through making the most important decisions. And where she goes, well, nothing matters because anything could happen. And I like that dichotomy. I think it bleeds into the generational conflict really well.
And I think to your point, because obviously once that conflict of her maybe not accepting her being gay is going to play itself out. But what I really appreciate is how it takes the whole time the daughter is basically just looking for her mother to tell her that it's like she wants her around almost.
It's the whole crux of the villain's plot, right? The villain.
Exactly. Yeah. And the fact is Michelle Yeoh's character maybe is dealing with this sort of existential dread as well and doesn't want to be around and has to find that within herself before she can give that to her daughter and finally see her for who she is and the true value that she brings to her life. But I don't know. This movie just makes me
we could probably go on for a long time.
The last thing that I want to say about the movie, if you don't mind,
please, is
I really love the dynamic between Evelyn and Joy and Becky. And at the end of the movie, Evelyn isn't the only one that is changed, but Joy and Becky are also changed in the way that they view Evelyn and how Evelyn communicates. I've had familial relationships that have taken me, a lifetime to understand the same thing. That when they say something seemingly negative, what they're saying in that moment is, I love you, And that's so difficult, especially as a child and a teen. It's from my personal experience, I didn't understand it as a child and a teen, and I only resented those relationships. It took me a long time and maybe even a little too late. I won't go deeper into that, but it took me being an adult and learning how to reframe what people are going through and understanding that our families and our parents and our grandparents and any type of familial relationship, they are also people going through the shit as well, but it's something that's so difficult to understand as a child. And I think the movie handles that so well in the last moments where Evelyn turns back to the car and says, Becky, you should really grow your hair out. And instead of Becky being like, fuck you, she smiles because she understands that in Evelyn's speak, she's saying, I love you, or welcome to the family, or in a weird way saying, I accept you, even though the sentiment might be seemingly contradictory to that. I just really appreciated that about the movie.
I want to shout out before we end, Walter Chaw, film critic, writes a lot for Film Freak Central as well as other places, did and I don't think I've actually sent it to you guys or if you've read it, but it's an absolutely incredibly heart-wrenching review that helped him recontextualize and understand his relationship with his parents who are first generation immigrants. And I would highly recommend reading that after seeing this movie. You will probably be brought to tears because it is ridiculously poignant. And the fact that on top of all the things we're discussing in terms of pure representation for this movie, I think it could speak to so many people who are generally underrepresented in film or stereotypically presented. And the fact that, this movie goes above and beyond to make this universal, even if closed-minded people think because of the cast that it can only be a certain way. But this is truly universal, and I would highly recommend checking out Walter Shaw's review on this movie for some really interesting insight from a Chinese American who was born to immigrant parents.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, it's a very personal story. It has to deal with the death of his father and how his mother treated it. It's just to give away a little bit of the premise of his story, and it's really moving for sure. Yeah, it's a great movie. Go see it. It's on video on demand. Just buy it. $20, whatever. It's the best $20 you'll ever spend on a movie. I guarantee you.
Blu-ray coming in like within a month, I think.
Definitely.
I got to get the
It's
4K.
such a beautiful movie. The way they shot. Like, I mean, there's shots that involve like hundreds of set frames that they put together, like including animated ones. Like it's I'm stealing a word from, I believe, David Chen when I say generous filmmaking is really the only way to put it. Of like, you didn't have to do all that, but you did, and it's beautiful. It's a lot though, and I would be interested to see someone who from an older generation, because it's and how well that communicates. I know that's not like the most important thing to think about, but
maybe someone that rushed out to see Top Gun Maverick.
We talk about
everyone.
My last thoughts I'll talk about will be like multiple times. Yeah. My last thought will be like, what's my favorite movie of the year? I don't know. It's going to be how beautiful art can be versus how cool jets look. It's going to be the ultimate, and that's the art versus commerce debate. So we'll see. Stay tuned, listeners, to see what makes it. All right, that's everything everywhere all at once. Let's wrap up with community feedback.
Welcome back to the community feedback section, loyal viewers and listeners. In this section, the Pop-O-Holics take care of some housekeeping. We are going insanely long, so I'm going to try to make this very tight and neat. In this section, we talk about what we have coming up in our Throwback Thursday episode. We go over any poll results that we have over on our Twitter at Pop-O-Holics. And then, of course, we read any 5-star written reviews that you've left us on either Spotify or the Apple Podcast app. Today, we'll talk about the Throwback Thursday episode and our Twitter poll results. This coming Thursday on youtube.com/Pop-O-Holics, we're going to be re-releasing our review of the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie from 2019. This is literally the last movie I saw before the pandemic. So those that haven't listened to our back catalog, expect everything after this Throwback Thursday release to be tonally different. But this was a very surprising movie. I think all of us enjoyed it to varying degrees. We have our Godzilla guru on the podcast returning for a different thing altogether, Danny Lopez, to come to talk about Sonic with us. It's a lot of fun. Go check it out on Thursday. And then our poll results. As Christian mentioned at the top of this episode, we are currently in Jurassic June in honor of the release of Jurassic World Dominion. We've been going over all of the Jurassic Park sequels in our main episodes on Wednesday. And on Twitter this month, we asked, which is your favorite Jurassic Park sequel? And obviously the choices were The Lost World, Jurassic Park 3, Jurassic World, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which we'll be touching on this coming Wednesday. Gentlemen, The Lost World won. 46% think that The Lost World is the best Jurassic Park sequel. As we've said in all of our episodes, for most of this, the Jurassic Park movies have gotten worse the longer the franchise has gone on. So considering that The Lost World is literally the second Jurassic Park movie in the franchise, these results make sense to me. Do you feel any differently or have any thoughts about these poll results?
Well, it's hard to top Spielberg with Spielberg, right? And I think that, my thoughts before revisiting all of these was always that The Lost World was the best sequel in my eyes. But what's interesting is Spielberg's Lost World, and we'll talk about this later, so listen to all the Jurassic June episodes to dive deeper into this, but The Lost World is like a worse Jurassic Park, and then all the other Jurassic Park movies are B movies, B monster movies, with varying levels of quality. And so what's interesting is I think that because it's a failure of being as good as Jurassic Park, I think it's a bigger failure than a bad monster movie, which is what everything else is. So it's kind of an unequal scale. And I think that my taste have soured on it. My thoughts have soured on this one as a whole. And I think I'm going to have to recant my thoughts about the entire series and recontextualize it, because although this is my gut feeling, this is my gut vote, I do think I have to rate the sequels as what's the best B monster movie, because nothing matches the original Jurassic Park. But I definitely feel the sentiment of our listeners.
If that's a whole different ballgame, and that would change my answer as well. What's the best B monster movie out of the Jurassic Park franchise? Brian, do you have anything you want to add to these results?
This is a weird one. I feel like I can't see this without nostalgia lenses because I'm so close to the first two, watched them countless times growing up. But I kind of agree a little bit that I think, especially with the one that we're talking about this week, they are very different movies. I think this one gets kind of back to first movie vibes a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about that on Wednesday.
You're speaking about Fallen Kingdom?
Yes, Fallen Kingdom, the latest one before Dominion. Yes, but it just depends on what you're looking for, right? Like Jeff Goldblum being the lead, I feel like that's gonna be a big factor. I think the special effects, in terms of that level, Lost World stands far above both 3 and Jurassic World. I think Kingdom is giving it a run for its money, actually, and maybe because of somewhere the CG is at, has really progressed in that way. So depending on what we're going to these movies for, I think it makes sense that the Lost World, the other Spielberg one, would take the cake here.
Spielberg is a pretty good director, as it turns out.
He does okay.
Who knew? Who knew? You know, a man that originally thought he should roll an orangutan down a ramp on roller skates when he was shooting.
Even the greats have
Close
that
Encounters
idea.
of the Third Kind.
There's a universe in which he did, and
I really want to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind in that multiverse.
hey, there's a universe in which we let an orangutan run this country. Am I right?
We're living in it.
We're living
anyway.
in it. You can vote on our polls at Twitter. That's linked in the video description and the show notes. You can also follow us on all the social medias there. Email us your feedback, questions, comments. What are your feelings? What are you quick hitting? What do you want us to cover? Pop-O-Holicscast@gmail.com. We read every single email we receive, so send there. Rate us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Look forward to that, and we'll see you on Wednesday for our review of Fallen Kingdom before next week Dominion. We're going to be a little late. I know a lot of the film reviewers got it out early, but we're going to really take our time. It might take our time. I mean, I went on vacation, and me and Chris have a play date to go see Dominion in 4DX the way
It's
that
gonna be a blast.
God intended it. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of